Language, Literature and Beyond, Exploring New Frontiers in English Studies, organized by the Department of Languages and Literature, English, Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, in collaboration with Literary Voice, an international peer-reviewed journal of English Studies. We shall begin the day with the invocatory Vedam by the students of the Institute.
Saraswate Namaha Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Jata Vedase Sunava Maso Mamarati Yato Nidahati Vedaha Sanaf Parshadati Durgani Vishwa Naveva Sindhun Duritatyagnihi ताम अग्निवर्णां तपसा ज्वलन्तीं वैरोचनीं कर्मफलेषु जुष्टां दुर्गां देवीं शरणमहं प्रपद्ये सुतरसि तरसे नमः अग्ने त्वं पारयानव्यो अस्मान् स्वस्तिभिरति दुर्गानि विश्वा पूश्च पृथ्वी बहुलान उर्वी भवातो कायतनयाय संयो विश्वानि नो दुर्गः जातवेदः सिन्धुन्ननावधुरितातिपर्षि अग्ने अत्रिवन्मनसा गृणानोऽस्माकं बोध्यविता तनूना पृतनाजितगुं सहमानमुग्रमग्निगुं हुवेम परमात् सदस्तात् शनः पर्षदति दुर्गानि विश्वाक्षामद्देवो अतिदुरितात्यग्निः प्रत्नोषिकमीड्यो अध्वरेषु सना च होता नव्यश्च सत्सि स्वाञ्चाग्ने तनुवं पिप्रयस्वास्मभ्यं च सौभगमायजस्व गोभिर्जुष्टमयुजो निषिक्तं तवेन्द्रविष्णोरनुसञ्चरेम नाकस्य पृष्ठमवि संवसानो वैष्णवीं लोक इह मादयन्ताम् कात्यायनाय विद्महे कन्याकुमारी धीमहि तन्नो दुर्गिः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्तिः।
Thank you, dear students. Now we present to you all a short snapshot of the behind-the-scene journey of dedication, teamwork, and persistence that made this conference possible. Yesterday, we embarked on a fascinating exploration of language, literature, and beyond, exploring new frontiers in English studies, with great scholars and speakers in the inaugural and plenary sessions. We also witnessed insightful presentations, engaging discussions, and a vibrant exchange of ideas in the different sessions that followed. Today, we shall continue this intellectual journey, delving deeper into the evolving landscape of English studies and pushing the boundaries of our literary scholarship. Now, I request Professor Rani P.L., Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences and Languages and Literature, to present our token of love to our guest speaker of the day, Professor Matthew George. I now have the honor of introducing our plenary speaker, Professor G.V. Matthew George. Professor G.V. Matthew George is a professor in the Department of English Literature at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. He holds MA degrees in English, Philosophy and Religion, Political Science, and MSc degree in Applied Psychology, a PhD in English Literature, an advanced diploma in German, and a junior diploma in French. His areas of research are meta-questions in the humanities, intellectual history of Europe, literary modernism, critical theory, philosophy of religion, hermeneutics, mythology and folklore, lifespan psychology, and Holocaust studies. He is an author of Ulysses Codinus' James Joyce's Inverse History of the Everyday, The Ontology of Gods, an account of enchantment, disenchantment, and re-enchantment, which is published in the year 2017, and Philosophical Reflections on Literary Studies, Why Do Things with Texts and What to Do with Them. And he also is the editor of a 3-volume international anthology of essays titled De Natura Fide, Rethinking Religion Across Disciplinary Boundaries. He was featured in the Oxford Economic Index of Critics in 2018, in the James Joyce Checklist published by Harry Ransom Center, the University of Texas at Austin since 2013, and in the Annotated International Bibliography, The Reception of Northern Fry, compiled by Robert D. Denham in 2021. He was a research fellow at the Zurich James Joyce Foundation, Switzerland in 2008. In the same year, he also received the prestigious DAAD Scholarship for Studies at Technische University Dresden, Germany. He is currently the director of the Center for Translation and Interpretation at IFLU. Professor George is also the pre-publication reviewer for Springer, Routledge, and Odin Black-Swan, Hyderabad. Yesterday, we listened to erudite talks on both literature and language, and today, I'm sure, Professor G.V. Matthew George will enlighten us on what is beyond both. Over to you, sir.
It's an absolute pleasure to be with you this morning. And let me profusely thank everyone who has worked behind the scenes in front of us. I'm really overwhelmed. And thank you for having me. It's a steep climb today. You might have noticed the title of this talk, The Ontology of Religious Narratives and Doctrines. So give me your full attention, at least because of the fact that it is not all English. We'll begin with something that is other than English. Often, when I go to deliver talks at various places, students ask me, especially in language-related conferences, what's my favorite word in English? And I say I have a favorite word. In fact, I have a couple of words that are quite dear to me, but these two are not English. One is French. Do you have foreign languages here? Some of the foreign languages? No. Okay. The first word is a French one. It is disponibilité. Disponible in French means available, literally available. But as you know, the French writer André Gide redefined this word disponibilité, the noun form of it, disponible, to mean a conscious openness to all experience. I repeat, a conscious openness to all experience. In order to learn anything, we have to be open to every kind of experience. We can't sit in judgment. So my first word is disponibilité. The other is a Greek one, right? And I need not explain it to you because I am feeling it all around. Can you guess the word? It's a Greek word, ataraxia, which means tranquility, right? And you feel it all around. I need not speak about that in such an ambience. But I have a few words of caution. Often you hear either your colleagues or your students saying, this goes over my head, right? About something that is very complex, an idea that is very complex. Have you ever thought, yeah, some ideas are really complex. Sometimes they are rendered in complex ways, but they're actually simple. But there are really complex ideas, right? And I don't know if you've heard about this concept. The human mind is a cognitive miser. Try to translate that into your mother tongues. The human mind is a cognitive miser, right? Which means that humans have a tendency to explain the world, negotiate the world with the least investment of cognitive energy or the least cognitive effort. So for the time being, we have to overcome these temptations, right? I usually tell my students, if higher education has to achieve anything in India, we have to get rid of this syndrome called this goes over my head syndrome, right? We must be able to grapple with complex ideas, right? And I say this quite advisedly. All of us know about AI, artificial intelligence. You know, if your students go to be recruited as prompt engineers, the prime quality that they require is the ability to compose complex content, right? So complexity is not a vice, it's a virtue for future, right? And I'm also surprised that people use the word intellectual. The word intellectual in an ironic sense. Sometimes people are a little sarcastic when they use the word intellectual, right? Which should not be the case. You know, I usually say, after you enter higher education, you don't have the right to utter the word intellectual, either noun or adjective with irony. We are in an intellectual field. We are in an intellectual profession, right? We are expected to be intellectuals. So intellectual is not a bad word, right? So let's rise a bit. I've divided my talk. We've got about an hour, or say 50, 55 minutes. I have divided it into three parts, in fact. I'll begin with a few general remarks about the academic study of religion. Then I go over to the core, the question of ontology. Don't be put off. I'll take you there step by step. Don't worry at all, right? And finally, I'll explore what do these reflections mean in the Indian context, okay? So a few general observations on the study of religion, academic study of religion, then the ontology of religion, religious narratives and doctrines, and finally, the ramifications in the Indian context, right? Religion is a concept or a topic to which the best minds in history have devoted themselves, right? Some of the best minds in human history have tried to grapple with the question of religion, faith, God. You know, remember that all these definitions are a little complex. So how do you define religion? Is religion about the divine or the supernatural, or is religion about transcendence? Right? It's a very rich field, and some of the best minds have contributed to it. observation number 2. We often have a tendency to deal with religion from a generalist perspective. It is also a specialized field, like artificial intelligence or machine learning, or the human brain. It's a specialized subject, But sometimes we tend to hear a lot about religion from a generalist perspective. In fact, it is a subject of study in perhaps the largest number of academic disciplines. Can you think of any topic or subject that is studied across disciplines, or at least these many disciplines? Can you think of some disciplines that grapple with or deal with the question of religion? Philosophy is naturally considered the home of, or considered the natural home of religion, right? Study of religion, transcendence, and so on. Then theology. Theology is an advocacy of God. You also have a secular discipline called religious studies. So you don't have to be a believer in order to pursue research in the field called religious studies. Then sociology, anthropology, and it goes on and on. Can you make a guess about the youngest discipline or the most recent discipline that tries to understand religion? Which is the most recent, the youngest scholarly specialization which tries to study religion? Have you heard of cognitive science of religion? Yeah, we know about cognitive science, right? But we also have a specialized young discipline called the cognitive science of religion. Right? You hear about people like Pascal Boyer, Scott Atran, and so on. We have many names. In order to reinforce the importance of the cognitive perspective in understanding religion or supernatural entities, let me give an example. Charles Darwin was relaxing with his dog on the lawns, and his umbrella was moving in the wind. And the dog thought that it was somebody who had encroached upon the lawns. And he started barking. He started responding to it. Right? There is an idea involved there. We have a tendency to decipher or detect agents or beings in situations that may or may not involve one. Cognitive science of religion calls that idea hyperactive agency detection device, or HADD, hyperactive agency detection device, otherwise called HAAD also, hyperactive agency detection. I'm giving these examples in order to demonstrate the point that it has become a very specialized discipline. How do you define religion? The current tendency is not to define religion in terms of a single definitional feature, but in terms of a complex of ideas, a set of ideas. And that conceptualization of religion is called the modular theory of religion, or modularity. Okay? If you are interested in looking up, the reference is Jack David Eller. The book is entitled Introducing the Anthropology of Religion from Culture to the Ultimate, by Jack David Eller, modularity theory of religion. So what are these modules of defining a religion? And an example of this has been put forward by the anthropologist Anthony F.C. Wallace, who belonged to a previous generation. He used something called the building block approach, and he tried to comprehend religion in terms of 13 observable universal behavioral complexes, such as, can you think of some features of religion? Prayer is one anyway, right? Yes, rituals, yes. So he looked at prayer, which is addressing the supernatural, music, physiological exercise, which means sensory deprivation. Tapas is an example of this feature. Exhortation, addressing another human being, reciting the code, which is mythology, morality, other aspects of the belief system, feasts, congregation, meetings, gatherings, right? And taboo, religious proscriptions. These are some of them. There are 13 of them. I've dealt with only some of them. The third pitfall that we must avoid while dealing with religion is that often it becomes a question of a debate or a discourse between religions, no? Rather than understanding religion as an entity or a phenomenon. Often it becomes a debate between religions, right? It's a beautiful exercise, but the thing is that it is undertaken from the wrong grounds often. I'll give you an example. It's a funny example from Ireland to show that acrimony can go to some funny extents. Ireland has been divided into Catholics and Protestants, and they had a civil war that lasted so many centuries. Right? So sometime in the 1950s or 60s, there was trouble, there was conflict, people fought with each other, and so many people were wounded. And a Protestant chaplain went to the hospital in order to visit the wounded Protestant people. He was waiting there in the lounge, and the nurse said, "I'm a little busy, can you wait for an hour? I'll come back after an hour and take you around." Right? But the chaplain was a bit impatient, so the nurse went around. So when she departed, he went around on his own, and he visited people. So wherever he saw the letter P, he waited there, prayed, and came back. He thought it meant Protestant. And wherever he saw the letters RC, he thought it was Roman Catholic, and he came back. Right? And the nurse met him on the way back, and she asked him, "You went around on your own? How did you know that these were Protestants and the others were Roman Catholics?" So the priest said, "I saw P. I knew it was Protestant. I stopped there. I prayed for them. When I saw RC, I walked past them, nodded my head. I didn't do anything because I knew RC meant Roman Catholic." So the nurse smiled, nodded her head, and said, "Dear chaplain, dear father, P means porridge, and RC means Rice Krispies. These were meant to be food to be delivered to them, not their religious affiliation." Right. With that lighter note, we begin the serious deliberation. Don't be put off by the word ontology. Those who have studied a bit of philosophy will know ontology is a branch of philosophy that deals with the question of being. Right? So in this context, I merely mean the status of being. What does it mean to be? Right? So for a human being to be, for an animal to be, for an object to be, for an event to be, it's all different. Right? So it merely means status of being. Okay? Yeah. So my friend was telling me in the morning, my WhatsApp DP is that of Heidegger, right? You might have noticed, so when we interacted, that's the German philosopher Heidegger. So he is known for a concept called fundamental ontology, right? I consider him one of the most profound philosophers of the 20th century, although his association with Nazism earned him a lot of bad reputation, but he is known for the book called Being and Time. He is known for the concept called a fundamental ontology. What does it mean to be? Right? Not merely the being of objects, but the basic or fundamental question of what does it mean to be? What does it mean to be? We will begin with what we all are familiar, literature. Unfortunately, we don't teach students the philosophy of literature. What is the status of entities that we find in a literary work? All those depictions in literary works, do they have to be true to the realities of the real world? Do they have to be? Yeah, if your answer is yes, then we can't write fantasy fiction, right? J.K. Rowling would not be a great personality in literary history, right? Or many other fantasy writers, Tolkien or others. What is the ontological commitment of literature? It only means what is the relation between what you depict in a literary work and reality of the real world. What is the connection? Do fictional events have to be like real events? Do fictional personalities have to be like real personalities? The answer is a bit complex. There are theorists who believe that literature has no ontological commitment, meaning it does not have to be like the real world at all. There are people who say that it is a relative ontological commitment. If you ask me, I'll say it varies from genre to genre. You have a genre called documentary fiction or non-fiction novel, typified by In Cold Blood. Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, it's a journalistic narrative, right, about two convicts till the gallows. It's a real incident, so that is documentary fiction. At the other end of the spectrum, you have fantasy fiction, Tolkien, you have J.K. Rowling, and many others. So it depends upon the genre. Fantasy fiction has a certain kind of ontological commitment. Realistic narratives have another kind of ontological commitment or ontological obligation on the question whether they have to be like real world or not. Now bear in mind that in the history of religion and literature, the boundaries have been a little blurred. In ancient Greece, for instance, Homer was like scriptures. The Odyssey and the Iliad were read like religious texts. Right? You have ancient Near Eastern texts like Enuma Elish, Epic of Gilgamesh you must be familiar with, right? Epic of Gilgamesh. So some of these texts are also considered religious. So literary and religious narratives were not compartmentalized through most parts of human history. And we have a philosopher named Sally McFagg who says that theological models or models of God are more similar to literary models than to scientific models. In fact, in other words, religion or conceptualization of religion has more similarities with literary studies than with visualizing reality in terms of atoms and molecules, string theory, quantum physics, and so on. Okay? As a beginning, let me say, why do we need to study the status of being of religion? The entities that religion deals with, they are unlike what we know in natural experience, right? Deities, gods, fairies, spirits are only one type of such entities. But there are many other entities, right? Karma, for example, self-contained causality of fate, the Hindu concept of karma, or the Buddhist concept of nidana, you might have heard, a concatenation of cause and effect, or the Greek concept of metempsychosis, which is transmigration of souls, or afterlife. All these are supra-empirical entities. So the categorization natural, supernatural does not really suit these diverse entities. Anyway, the object of religion is unique. It is unlike anything that we know in everyday experience, right? So heaven or God, it's unlike, all these entities are unlike what we know in everyday life. These objects are unique, and they have to be understood in a non-reductive fashion. See, an objection in literary studies is that we reduce everything in literary studies to something other than literature. For example, ideology. So when you say that literary texts are all ideological, literary texts they have an ideology, but they are not only ideology, right? So when you think of literature and literary texts in terms of ideology, right? Because it's a singular realm, it's a unique set of entities or concepts, they are not easy to know. In other words, there are epistemological limitations. there are also limitations to representing these entities. So we are left with three options. One, either we can render entities of the religious realm in analogous terms, meaning like natural entities. So human beings have deities in the form of humans, right? Or sometimes animals, or some creature that we know in our day-to-day life. That is why the Greek philosopher Xenophon said, if horses and oxen had hands with which to make their gods, they would have made the deities like themselves. Xenophon, that's what Xenophon said. So we can think of these entities in analogous or parallel terms, terms that are similar to the world of natural experience. The second is a concept called apophatic theology, or via negativa. The idea is that the transcendent or the divine or the ultimate can be defined only in terms of what it is not, because we cannot know it fully. Only mystics can know the ultimate directly, without any metaphors, without symbolic terms. Can you think of an Indian example? Wonderful, yes. The conception of Brahman or the ultimate in Upanishads, and also Avaduta Gita, right? The 10th century work attributed to somebody named Dattatreya. Avaduta Gita also makes it quite explicit, neti neti, which means not this, not that, or neither this, not that. It's a characterization of Brahman or the ultimate, right? So that is via negativa or apophatic theology. The third route, or the third option to depict, represent, to know these entities is what I call free ontology, or free ontological speculation. It's like literature, it's quasi-literary. What does the prefix quasi mean? Like, right? So it's literature like. And it is warranted by a cause. You require some cause, some need to indulge in free ontological speculation. And these entities can be created, they can be multiplied, they can increase in potency and character. For example, the Catholic Church originally did not have the concept of the purgatory. Purgatory, if you know your Dante, right? The three parts are, Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, right? Originally, the Christian conception did not have purgatory, but then the church introduced the concept of purgatory. If you're not that sinful, if you have not committed that many sins, you spend some time in this place, purgatory, but you will not be condemned to eternal suffering in hell. You can get promoted to heaven. So you can create new entities, right? Then this also applies to philosophical conceptions. Neoplatonism, right? Neoplatonism, they looked at the world and they looked at the conceptions of God. God is good, then why is there so much evil in the world? That has been a dilemma for believers of religion, right? So they said that, Neoplatonists said that the world is not created by God, but an entity called a demiurge. Can you name a literary writer who has borrowed that idea to create his own mythological system? One guess or two guesses. Louder, louder. William Blake. William Blake was also a painter. He's got his engravings. So many of his ideas are based on things that we're discussing. And these entities can change from becoming animate, from becoming inanimate. Some principles can become beings. Humans can become divine. So in many parts of the world, you have this idea of a village hero or a folk hero being promoted to the status of a deity. In Tamil Nadu, you have Kannagi being raised to the status of a deity, right? So village deity cult is part of, so you have a free ontology. And Judeo-Christian theology, as an example of the fact that the religious realm is one of singular entities, take the case of incarnation. When God becomes man, you don't know what to expect. So you treat with a deity, be it in the Indian context or be it in the Judeo-Christian context, how do you treat that situation, right? So in the Judeo-Christian context, so in the case of Jesus, a concept called kenosis was introduced. Kenosis, K-E-N-O-S-I-S. You study a concept called anxiety of influence, Harold Bloom's anxiety of influence. So this is one of the terms that he uses there as one of the revisionary ratios. Kenosis literally means pouring out. So the divine came down, but the divinity was poured out. The divine engaged in an act of self-emptying. Now you got human. Right? So that's one concept that is introduced like that. You might have heard of deism, D-E-I-S-M, right? Isaac Newton was not a deist, but he was influenced by deism. What is the concept of deism? God created the world, but he does not run the world personally. He is withdrawn, and we can understand the world with our reason. You don't need revelation. In other words, deism is religion without revelation, right? And human reason can really apprehend the operations of the universe. That is deism. Yes? Sorry? Or the blind watchmaker. Yeah. You might have read that book by the world's most famous atheist, Richard Dawkins. Yeah. It is actually a metaphor borrowed from William Paley. Right. Yeah. You know the concept, right? Somebody has created the world, or somebody has created the watch. The watchmaker does not have to be with the watch in order to run it. It runs on its own. The cosmos or the universe is also like that. The blind watchmaker metaphor. That's one of the best books by Richard Dawkins, apart from his celebrity book, The Selfish Gene. The God delusion has certain problems, but Blind Watchmaker is a brilliant book. After The Selfish Gene, perhaps you can also read up The Greatest Show on Earth, which has been very positively reviewed. Now, for all these speculations or all these religious ideas, they satisfy certain urges, some aspirations of ours, some concerns of ours. They address some concerns. I've made a catalog for you to explain why we believe in religion, why we believe in deities. Right? A few. It's a long list. Be with me. I'll utter this only each one only once. So the God signifier, or the signifiers in religion, capture a variety of concerns, urges, aspirations, affinities, and predicaments. Number one, a desire for alterity. We want a scenario to be different from what we already are in. Right? The need for transcendence. Transcendence literally means to climb over, rise above what we have. An affinity for the supramundane. An appetite for the infinite. Appetite for the infinite is a term used by Joseph Brodsky. Those who have studied Freud might remember this term, oceanic feeling. Yeah, he borrowed it from Romain Rolland, or anglicized the pronunciation Romain Roland, French Romain Rolland. A higher plane of existence, a pattern in contingencies, an underlying or overarching reality beneath or beyond chaotic multiplicitous appearances. So that is Shankaracharya's concept of Brahman, basically. You know, my residence is only a few kilometers away from Shankaracharya's household. So he traveled all the way from my place to Kashmir. So, and he introduced the concept of Advaita, non-dualism, and the concept of Brahman. So there's only one reality, right? I'll be speaking about it towards the end. So there's one reality beneath all or beyond all these multiplicitous appearances. The ground of being and a sentient basis for an inert cosmos. A character in a characterless world. The desire for intense or peak experience. Peak experience is a term coined by Abraham Maslow. Yeah. Abraham Maslow, ethical guarantees and enforcements. That's what those who do good should get rewards, those who do evil should get punishments. The fulcrum of afterlife, you know, a life after death. And as yet unrealized human qualities and aspirations externalized in deities. You know, there's a way of looking at deities are the best human beings, no? So some of the deities are also ideal human beings. So Blake, the human form divine, right? You have that idea as well. Now, in many periods of history, it is not a concern to believers whether these deities actually existed or not. What they bothered was whether these entities are formally or aesthetically efficacious. The Greeks did not really bother whether there was a deity called Apollo or not. Supernatural, natural supernatural is a problematic entity. If you read your Homer in depth, you will see that Athena stands so close to Telemachus. Right? There's hardly a line between the natural and the supernatural. Right? So, natural, supernatural is a problematic binary. Now, you also have a view that the so-called supernatural formulations of religion are only a way of speaking. What the French called façon de parler. Façon, F-A-C-O-N, D-E, parler, P-A-R-L-E-R, meaning to speak, a manner of speaking. Anthony F.C. Wallace, whose building block approach I mentioned at the beginning, he says, when you say you owe everything to God, you actually mean you owe everything to society. When you say you fear God, you actually mean you fear society. When you fear that a divine entity will punish you, you actually mean that society will punish you, which is the idea of Anthony F.C. Wallace. See, in the ancient Near East, Mesopotamia, Iraq, Syria, Israel, Palestine, there were covenants or agreements between different kingdoms. It said that the Old Testament covenant between God and man, or God and the kingdom of Israel, is actually a projection of these earthly covenants onto a heavenly realm. Jan Assmann, who is an Egyptologist who studied Egyptian civilization, religion, culture, etc., he says that it is a matter of semantic relocations. What is earthly, you project onto the heavenly realm. Remember this, semantic relocations. Yeah, we teach myths, don't we? Yeah, we have some myth or the other in every work of literature. Ancient Greece had a method of interpreting myths called euhemerism, named after a 4th century Greek mythographer named Euhemerus, E-U-H-E-M-E-R-U-S. What is euhemerism as a method of interpreting myths? It is interpreting mythical events as historical events and mythical personages as historical personages. Think of the Odyssey. It said that Odysseus was returning along a route that was actually a maritime trade route. And the Odyssey is a story of Greek colonization, which is a euhemeristic method of interpreting myths. This does not mean that literature and religion have no differences between them. Somebody who has worked on this is George Santayana, the Spanish-American philosopher, who said, religion is idealized experience. It's an idealized abstraction from our real experience, and we are made to conform to that. But religion is different from poetry in the sense that it acts upon us. It has a direct bearing on our faith. It has a claim over our belief. Okay? Religions or religious narratives or religious doctrines are known for what I have put in my works, ontological insistence, which means the supernatural or the transcendent cannot be reduced to the natural. This is not symbolic. This is not metaphorical. It's all real. That's what religion insists. Right. But there are many reasons why religion still persists. I call them mitigating and augmenting factors. It's a long catalog. I'll deal with just 2 of them. We often deal with religious conceptions both in realistic terms and in symbolic terms. When we fall ill, when we want to pass our exams, we want a real God. But we also say some of the religious doctrines are symbolic. Adam and Eve taking the fruit, the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden is not literal. People say that, literary scholars say that it's man and woman discovering sexual activity, right? So that's one way of looking at it. So religion facilitates a two-plane engagement. We deal with these both in realistic terms and in symbolic terms. Then we have a concept called atemporal self-presentation. All these religious ideas evolved over a long period of time. But a believer, a practitioner of religion, looking at the religious system of ideas, will think that, or is likely to think that, it has always been like this. It's a temporal process. It's a diachronic process. But any point of time in history, we have only a synchronic presentation. Just as we understand language, there are synchronic and diachronic studies of language, right? So religious system also operates like that. Right. Now you might be wondering whether I am thinking of all these from a believer's perspective or a non-believer's perspective. That is the billion-dollar question, right? I have an answer for you. I have posited a new term called equi-reversible ontology. Equi-reversible ontology, EQUI-REVERSIBLE. Which really explains our predicament in dealing with belief and religion. You think of any historical practice. What the atheist does is that he reduces even the transcendental to the historically specific. Right? So be it slavery or caste or anything, polygamy in certain religions, they're all historically specific, right? What an atheist does is, or what a fundamentalist does, is to elevate the historically specific to the transcendent. God decreed like this. Atheist does the opposite. He reduces the transcendental to the historical. Remember this formulation. An atheist elevates the historically specific to the transcendental, and the fundamentalist reduces the transcendental to the historic. Yeah. Another example, I have plenty of examples for you. Ara Norenzayan, a cognitive anthropologist named Ara Norenzayan, wrote a book called The Big Gods. Why do we have universal gods? Some of the deities were really local. What the Greeks does, or what the Greeks did is to compile all these local deities into single big deities, right? Hera from one region, Juno, they all got combined, Zeus, Jupiter, etc. They got combined different. It said that Greek religion is basically a literary creation, right? Literary writers really created Greek religion, which is not entirely true. Aaron Orenstein says, if you say that your God operates only in a certain area, you can't do international trade. Right? You need a deity that presides over the entire universe, so that a Greek man trading in India or China will also say that, be honest with me, a single God is watching over all of us. The Big Gods, a book written by Aaron Orenstein. Look at every religious phenomenon, incarnation, revelation, scriptures. They can all be explained in both human, sociological, cultural, psychological, cognitive, and evolutionary terms, and also in purely religious terms. That is what I mean by equi-reversible ontology. Did God create man, or did man create God? In Malayalam, anyone from Kerala? Yeah. Okay, all of you, great. So we have a song there, no? Manushan madangale srishtichu. മതങ്ങൾ ദൈവങ്ങളെ സൃഷ്ടിച്ചു, മനുഷ്യനും മതങ്ങളും ദൈവങ്ങളും മണ്ണ് പങ്കുവെച്ചു, right? So man created religions created gods, humans, religions and gods, they divided the land among each other, right? So but that need not be true, right? So it is still kept in suspended animation. Did God create man or did man create? Did God create man or did man? Did God create man or did man create God? Is culture a divine gift or are divinities cultural creations? Is everything transcendental or is everything all too human? Human, all too human. Whose work is that? Human, all too human. We discussed that person's name in the morning, right? Friedrich Nietzsche. Human, all too human. But any religious conception is mediated. Tropology, figurative language, plays a great role, right? And institutional religion gives us these mediated forms in a ready-made fashion. But often we do not take these conceptions as such, right? We reappropriate them, we negotiate with them. I'll give you an example from Judaism. So Jews are, they prided themselves as God-chosen people, right? And there is no group of people who have suffered the most like them, right? I was telling somebody on the way, Israel-Palestine, you won't find an area under the sun that is soaked with that much of history and that much of blood, right? Almost every empire has ruled over that area. Every ruler has fought over that area, even now, right? Right. So Egyptians, Assyrians, Chaldeans, Babylonians, Greeks, Alexander, Rome, finally the British. Right, yeah. So they suffered a lot. So after the Holocaust, which killed 6 million Jews, right? So there were 9 million Jews in Europe at that time, 6 million perished, 2/3 of the European Jewry perished, only 1/3, only 3 million survived. There were out of the 9 million, 6 million perished. It is a struggle for Jews to come to terms with their faith, right? So if there is a God alive, how come we perished? And he came up with a concept called hestepanim. H-E-S-T-E-R, hestepanim, P-A-N-I-M. Hestepanim. What is hestepanim? It means hidden face. Literally, it means hidden face or concealed providence. Hidden face or concealed providence. The idea is that usually in the normal course of things, the divine takes care of you. But there are occasions when God withdraws himself and leaves you to the mercy of natural historical forces. What is the concept called? Hestepanim, which literally means hidden face, metaphorically concealed providence. Now, this is how human beings negotiate. When the received notions of religion are not available, we renegotiate. It's actually a case of what Jacques Derrida calls iterability. How many of you have heard this term? Iterability? Yeah. What does it mean? It's a portmanteau term, right? Portmanteau terms, combinations of two words. Like galumph, Lewis Carroll has galumph, gallop in triumph. So here, iterability. It's a combination of two words. Which two words? One Latin iterare, meaning to repeat, and Sanskrit itara, meaning the other. So together it means, the word is iterability, I-T-E-R-A-B-I-L-I-T-Y. Iterability. Yeah, Derrida was quite fond of coining portmanteau terms, and iterability is one among them. It combines Sanskrit itara with Latin iterare. So the English word reiterate comes from itera, Latin infinitive in iterare. So iterability literally means repetition with a difference. What does it exactly mean? If you've heard the term iterability formulated by Derrida, what does that word exactly mean? The capacity of text to produce different meanings in different contexts. So the text will find new readers, they will read new meanings into the text or out of the text. Iterability. So the history of religion is also a history of negotiating and renegotiating meaning like that. In other words, it is a case of textualism of belief, or in the reader's terms, it's a history of iterability. The ideas of God have changed over time. We generally think of God as a personal entity, right? A personal God. That was not the conception of Middle Ages or the medieval period. In the medieval period, God was considered the height of being, the climax of being. What does it mean to be? Remember our initial discussion? What does it mean to be? Ontology. It is considered the height of being. God was the most perfect being. Right? It's not the personal conception of God. It's merely the climax of being. And not all religions in history have had benevolent deities. Usually the divine is known for what are called the omni-attributes, right? What are these omni-attributes? Omnipresent. God is present everywhere. Omniscience, knowing everything, all-knowing. Omnipotent. Is that all? Omnibenevolence also. God wills only good. But in the history of religion, especially, have you heard of this text called Enuma Elish? It belongs to almost the same time as Epic of Gilgamesh. It is an ancient mythological text. It's a story of cosmogony and theogony. How did gods come into existence? How did different crafts, professions come into existence? So myth, what is myth after all? It's a story of how things came to be, right? But in the 20th century, you have Paul Ricoeur, a philosopher, who says that a myth is not only a device for explaining the real world, but it is also a device for exploring possible worlds. Exploring possible worlds. Paul Ricoeur, R-I-C-O-E-U-R. Paul Ricoeur. Myths are not only meant for explaining the real world, actual world, but also exploring possible worlds. Okay, that's a different idea, isn't it? Remember that literary creations are based on the notion of possible world, introduced by the philosopher Gottfried Leibniz. I mean, his idea was about the world. God has created the best of all possible worlds. You must have heard this phrase, no? Best of all possible worlds. Yeah, but it's a model for literary creation. So, possible world theory. If you're interested in that concept, you can read the works of Ruth Ronan, R-O-N-E-N, Ruth Ronan, and Thomas Pavel, P-A-V-E-L-L. Is history of religion a history of iterability or textualization of faith or renegotiation? That is why we require hermeneutics. Hermeneutics, it's not about individual interpretation. Can I take another 5 minutes more? Another 5 minutes is all right, right? Yeah. So hermeneutics, it is a meta-science of interpretation. We have a lot of misunderstanding in the humanities and literary studies. For example, people use philosophical hermeneutics as if it is a method of textual interpretation. Philosophical hermeneutics is different. It's about our position in the world, Heidegger, etc. Right? So hermeneutics is a meta-science of interpretation. It began with interpretation of the Bible. So from the Middle Ages, or Middle Ages is not the exact term, I would prefer medieval period. Right? So there were 4 methods of interpretation. One, literal or historical meaning. So whatever is found in a scriptural book is literally or historically true. The second is allegorical reading. I gave the example of Adam and Eve and the forbidden fruit. Right? Is it allegorical or literal? Yeah. So you have a different idea called typological, method called typological interpretation, which is basically the idea that some things in the Old Testament prefigure the New Testament. or the New Testament fulfills what is found in the Old Testament. Abraham went to sacrifice his son Isaac. He was almost killed. Then he sees a ram caught in the thorns. Look at that image. A ram. It's not a lamb. A strong ram caught in the thorns with his horns caught in the thorns. It is an image of Christ with the thorn, right? Or the tree of life prefiguring the cross on which Christ was crucified. That's called typological interpretation. Allegorical, typological interpretation. Is there anything you missed? Do you want me to repeat anything? The first, literal or historical interpretation. Second, allegorical and typological interpretation. It's an extension of it. Tropological meaning or tropological interpretation, which is that it's basically about the moral truth or doctrine. And finally, tropological, and finally, anagogical meaning or anagogical interpretation, which is about eschaton, last days, final judgment, the battle of Armageddon, and so on. Right? Yeah, but hermeneutics has become quite secular now. Paul Ricoeur, whom I mentioned earlier, introduced a concept called hermeneutics of suspicion. What you see on the surface is not the real thing, it is misleading. So all ideology, all psychoanalytic meanings is something that you find beneath. So practice hermeneutics of suspicion. So feminism, post-colonial criticism, psychoanalysis, everything is a variety of what Paul Ricoeur calls hermeneutics of suspicion. Now, I'll wind up with the reference, with the implications of what we have discussed for the Indian context. About the Judeo-Christian system, or what we call the Western system, and Indian religions, how do we engage with that? Is it the same system? Or do we require a different method, a different paradigm or model to deal with? So one view is that belief is basically a Judeo-Christian concept, and it is not a concept that is applicable to other religions. It's not true, no? It's not true. Because the people who hold that view say that it is more about action, ritual, rather than belief. Think of all the religions in human history, Greek or Egyptian or Indian religions or Native American religion or European paganism. It said that the notion of belief is absent in them. It is more about action, deed, ritual. And we are likely to be tempted by that notion. In order to act, in order to practice ritual, you must have at least an implicit belief, right? Right? So when people say that certain systems are unique, it's actually a trap. We must not fall into that, right? That is the asymmetry of power between the East and the West. They want us to work on something indigenous. If you want to work on some grand metaphysical scheme, there is less encouragement for that, right? We should not fall into that trap. So the East-West discourse is a complex one, right? I have been investing in it for quite a few years, right? So are these two systems? Are these two radically distinct systems? If you think of Donald Davidson's positions, he thinks that all ideas can actually be translated, right? But there are people like Michael and Foster who think that these are radically different conceptual schemata, and one category cannot be applied to another. Okay? Let's take the concept of Hinduism and Hindu philosophy in general. Okay? So we usually hear this formulation, Hinduism is not a religion, but a way of life, right? But the religious, that's a generalist characterization of Hinduism. I am as much at home with Dvaita, Advaita, and Vishishta Advaita as with transubstantiation and consubstantiation. So you can take my word at that. Scholars of religion say that this is a collegiate religion. Hinduism is a collegiate religion. Now, what do you mean by the term? At one end of the spectrum, you have highly sophisticated metaphysics and philosophy, like the six systems, 6 Astika systems, of philosophy. Which are they? Vedanta, Mimamsa, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, and Yoga. 6 Astika systems and the Nastika systems also, Charvaka, Buddhism, Jainism, etc. Right? It's a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, you have this metaphysics. At the other end of the spectrum, you have something like a folk Hinduism, right? Like we spoke about the village deity cult, small heroes. Everything is part of one religion, right? It's a collegiate religion. Now, do you find any similarities between the Western system and the Eastern system? They are not exactly the same. They are not radically different either. You see, if you consider this spectrum, you will find theism there. You will find agnosticism there. Yeah, there are verses in the Rig Veda which say, whether there is somebody behind all this reality, whether there is somebody there or not, if there is, in modern terms we say, is there intelligent design? So the author says, I don't know. You have theism, high core theism, you have agnosticism, then you have Charvaka, atomistic. You look at each of these. Vaisheshika is an atomistic theory, isn't it? Nyaya, logic. Yoga, self-discipline, right? Sankhya, analysis of matter and spirit. Vedanta, God realization. Mimamsa, interpretation of the Vedas, right? So you have a spectrum. You might find certain alliances, certain similarities. It's like a Venn diagram. Do you remember your Venn diagram from the school? Yeah. There are some commonalities, some divergences. Right. And look at the word theism, atheism itself. Atheism, literally it means non-belief in God. But in the Hindu context, it means whether you rely in the authority of Vedas, right? A few other examples. Shankaracharya spoke about something called adhyasa. Do you remember that? Yeah. So the world is multiplicitous. Actually, there's only one reality, Brahman. Yeah. Brahman. Sorry? Yeah. So the world appears multiplicitous because there are two reasons. One, Maya, illusion. But he introduces another concept called adhyasa, superimposition. Yeah. What is the characteristics of the physical or the one with a form are imposed on something without a form like the Brahman and vice versa. Now you might wonder, are adhyasa and Immanuel Kant's ideas of forms of perception or categories of understanding, are they the same? They are not the same, but there are similarities. Similarly, the Jain concept of Anekantavada. Anekantavada, Forum for Contemporary Theory at Baroda, we were talking about it in the morning. Yeah. One of their journals is called Anekanta, right? The original Jain idea is that the ultimate truth also has multiple facets, sides. So reality is not one, truth is not one. So is this and postmodernism the same? Not exactly the same, but there are similarities and divergences. Think of the Venn diagram model of understanding. So, turning into ourselves is not a solution, right? We must be able to engage in intelligent, informed dialogue. The problem is that we deal with religion in very generalist terms. One of my teachers at the beginning of my research said, don't sit on the shore, take a plunge. So let us take a plunge. Okay, so thank you very much. So, you have done some time for questions? Winding up, right, yeah. Right, yeah. I took it exactly an hour, right? Thank you. Questions or comments, or shall we wind up? Huh? Yeah.
Silent participants, do you have any questions?
Yes.
Hello, sir. So I do not know the It's an axiological, is it like, the question is axiological?
Yeah, could you tell me your name?
Yeah, my name is Seba, S-A-B-A, Seba. Yes, so sir.
I saw your name in the list of presenters. You're
Yes,
presenting
I
today.
am there,
Yes.
sir.
Yeah.
I'm little scared now.
No.
Okay, anyway, sir.
Ataraxia, tranquility, freedom from distress. Be free your minds.
Sure, sir. Sir, my question is there any need to go into this, or is there any need to research religion where we are still speculating things? Or, or we'll just keep on speculating and come on. This is my question.
Should we speculate, or what is the alternative?
Or, we
accept
just
only those things that are completely...
Is there, like, like ontologically present?
Yeah. Not only about researching in the field of religion, but also in literature. I was telling my friend in the morning, Dr. Venkataramana, if you look at my two profiles, my Facebook profile is that of Wittgenstein. My WhatsApp one is of Heidegger. Actually, they two represent two poles of what we do with knowledge, right? Heidegger, bold speculation, being, right? Hegel, people like that are, they go into terrains that are otherwise unexplorable, right? So on the one hand, you must boldly speculate. But what you speculate, you must also subject to rigorous scrutiny. This is exactly what researchers should do, right? After our coursework is over, at EFLU, after the PhD coursework is over, at the end of the first year, after that, they submitted their extended research proposal, they defend it. I say to these scholars, after that period, a year and a quarter, you must give your mind the freedom to come up with new ideas. Write them down, then subject it to the hardest scrutiny. That should be the ideal, I wouldn't say method, the dynamics of research, not just in literary studies, not just in religious studies, but across a lot of humanities. Remember, humanities have a different dynamic. They are radically different from hard sciences. They are radically different from social sciences. The Germans made a distinction between, someone by name Wilhelm Dilthey made a distinction between the methods of these two. One, the method of humanities is Verstehen, interpretive understanding. The method of hard sciences is Erklären, law-based causal explanation. Right? So we have some freedom in the humanities. Seize that freedom, but subject that freedom and exercise of that freedom to thorough scrutiny.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, nice question. Yeah. Anything else?
So,
yes.
that was a wonderful presentation, sir. And so I am Lakshmi Menon. I'm a faculty cum researcher at the institute here.
Puttaparthi campus.
Yeah, we have a campus at Anantapur.
I know, yeah,
so,
I heard the history.
Yeah. So, sir, I'm actually dealing with hermeneutics. So I was very interested in your talk. Could hermeneutics, be a methodology or a via media to research phenomenological hermeneutics, I mean, to research religious experiences? Because, why should we think that religious experience is only speculative? So when we say that, we are discounting the actual experience of many people who've had experiences of, say, transcendental or, whatever name we may call it by. We may call it religious, spiritual, transcendental, whatever, but they are out of the ordinary. So why should we, in academia, discount it? Because after all, literature is imagination, right? So why should, and imagination, Paul Ricoeur says, is another word for possibility. That's if I may say so. So imaginative or fictive or fictional does not only mean something that is not there, it also points out to something that is possible. So imaginative also means the possible. So why cannot literature deal with religious and spiritual experiences? So I just want you to, I think your question is a little maybe linked to that, because I think children today are so focused on the Western atheistic models that the richness of Indian systems that also embrace the spiritual as well as the atheistic, as you were saying. So if you could give some clarity, I know my question is really vague, but some
I'm
clarity on
gathering
that.
all of them down. Should we rush, or shall I answer this in detail? Should we rush? 2 minutes? 2 minutes is okay. Yeah. Okay, you have many questions, right? One is about, hermeneutics is a field, right? You have many methods there, right? Yeah, phenomenology, if you look at this possibility from the rigor of post-structuralism, the ideology, etc., phenomenology is a little dated. But there are intelligent phenomenological critics dealing with not just religious experience, but also many literary. Maurice Natanson is one. Maurice Natanson, Natanson, right? Yeah, see, many intelligent people have been open to religious experience, William James being one. William James, right? Yeah, so the thing is that we see only that part of the Western scholarship which appears to us atheistic. Do you think America is atheistic? No. America is not atheistic, no. Trump's strong part of the base is evangelical, right? I happen to listen to, it's not only about certain experiences that might not be amenable to rational demonstration or verbal articulation. Yes, we must have a space for that. The very fact that I have chosen this topic is a recognition of that, right? I have a student from Karnataka who is working on more or less the same problem. How do you apprehend and represent mystical experience? He is working on agories, right? Yeah. So this is a paradox. Yeah. The mystical experience is not directly accessible to others. It's a first-person experience. Phenomenology is first-person philosophy, remember? So phenomenology can play a role, but there are other tools also. The paradox is that you have something inaccessible, beyond ordinary apprehension, but which requires some form of expression, representation. That's a paradox. In fact, there is a second part of my paper which is about that paradox, right? How do you show that in analogous terms? Do you show that in natural terms? So I have something called pre-ideated ontology, split ontology, symmetric ontology, which all deals with this thing, right? So phenomenology is one. And also take some of these ideas spoken by others a little seriously. I just drop the statement, I'll leave you to think more about it. The argument given by pro-life group as opposed to pro-choice, US has this debate about, medical termination of pregnancy, right? So pro-life versus pro-choice. So it's also, in academia, we have been mainly pro-choice. Women should have reproductive rights. But there is also an argument in pro-life. People ask, in the case of incest and molestation, what do you do? Their argument is that even a child, that is, whatever way the child is conceived, it is life. And that life has a right to survive, right? Even in incest and violations, yeah. That's all? Okay. Thank you so much. It has been a privilege being with you.
We are deeply grateful to Professor G.V. Matthew George for sharing his time and knowledge with us today, and the talk was exceptionally informative and has provided us with much to consider, and it has also helped us to overcome our cognitive miser tendencies, and it has provided us with much to contemplate on questions like what does it mean to be and why do we believe in religion. Thank you. Now I would like to invite our head of the Department of Languages and Literature, Dr. Mithali Khanna, to kindly felicitate the guest speaker. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Now we'll have a short break for tea and refreshment, and I request all the participants to assemble back in the seminar hall after the parallel technical sessions for the cultural program and valedictory session, and the venues for the parallel technical session, ways of seeing and the art of listening, the interplay of image, sound and narrative is in room number A5, Annex building. And for languages and literature, teaching language to coding meanings and translating identities is A6. And for story world of childhood, exploring the expanding boundaries of children's literature and young adult fiction is MMLC. And we are also having quiz as a part of our culture program, so interested participants can contact Ms. Aarti, Assistant Professor from the Department of Languages and Literature English, as well as the other coordinators. Thank you. And male participants and female participants are requested to go for tea break, and they can come back to their respected rooms.